Just like most other professions, the drug world is mostly dominated by egotistical and brazen men. However, also like most other professions, women can do it just as well, and oftentimes better than those egotistical and brazen men can. The most famous, or rather, infamous example of this being, of course, Griselda Blanco. Griselda was such an icon in this business that modern-day coke rappers have a record label named in her honor called Griselda Records. Welcome to Criminist. Join us as we take a journey together and unravel the real-life story of the Queenpin's ruthless rise to the top. Griselda Blanco was born on February 15, 1943, and while the exact location she's from is debated on, we know that she was raised somewhere on Colombia's north coast. The area she was raised in was extremely dangerous, with violent crimes running rampant on a near-constant basis. The police had essentially labeled the area she lived in as a no-go zone, and Griselda herself was no stranger to these crimes. She claims to have been assaulted while growing up here, which very well may be the case, unfortunately, but it's hard to decipher what's true and what's an attempt at sympathy or self-victimization when it comes to Griselda. While these are also just rumors, some say Griselda was even participating in the violent crimes of her hometown by the time she was just 11 years old. The rumor has it that she abducted a young boy from a rich neighborhood and wrote a ransom note in the hopes that she would get rich quick. However, the family of the boy didn't believe that an 11-year-old would really kill someone, so they refused. As the story goes, Griselda shot the boy in the face to make her point. Whether this story is true or not, there's no denying that Griselda grew up to be ruthless and that this tale is in line with her character. She was linked to over 250 murders and practically invented the practice of having sicarios pull up on motorcycles, gun down their foes, and disappear into the night. In the mid-1950s, Griselda left home, trying to escape her abusive and alcoholic mother. This is when she would meet Carlos Trillo and begin dating him, even though they had quite the age gap between the two of them. Carlos Trillo would be a valuable asset to Griselda for a long time, as he specialized in smuggling people from Colombia to other countries and forging documents, a skill Griselda learned and held onto. The two of them had 3 children together by 1962 and had established a criminal network in New York, a town they often liked to visit. Griselda had grown up to be a charismatic woman, the type of person that carried around that sinister charm that let them break the rules without anyone else caring very much. Another talent she'd used to advance her businesses. Around this time, her husband mysteriously died of liver failure, but many people think Griselda actually killed him, hence her nickname, the Black Widow, a name she would only later solidify. Her next relationship was with Alberto Bravo, a big-time gangster with a criminal network he used to smuggle cocaine. While Alberto and Griselda remained in Queens, they upped the amount of cocaine they were selling, and they became increasingly creative with how they smuggled it. One of their popular methods was employing conventionally attractive women to wear bras with the cocaine stuffed in them. Women that were trained to flirt with any law enforcement who may notice and try to steer their attention to something else. In fact, Griselda was moving so much cocaine this way that she was making almost $10 million per week. The mafia could barely keep up with the profit Griselda's operation was pulling in, and even though the cops caught wind of this cocaine boom, they couldn't figure out much about who was responsible, as no one wanted to sell out Griselda. They were either on her payroll, or more often than not, afraid of her. Due to her violent nature and her knack for ordering hits on anyone she didn't like, whispers began surfacing that if you exposed Griselda Blanco, you got mutilated, and no one wanted to take that chance. Well, almost no one. The DEA actually did find 2 former drug mules who were willing to cough up some information about Griselda in the mid-70s, kickstarting an op called Operation Banshee that was anything but successful. Remember the whole document forging thing? Well, as soon as Griselda felt the heat, she whipped up a new identity, grabbed her husband and children, and went back to Colombia. However, it wouldn't be as easy to set up her business in Colombia, as it was now under the rule of the one and only Pablo Escobar. This led to a less than phenomenal time for Griselda. In 1975, she was trying as hard as she could to reclaim Colombian turf from Pablo Escobar, but her efforts failed. On top of this, her husband was spending lots of time in other cities, and word got around that he was cheating on her and spilling her secrets. She confronted Bravo in a parking lot of a club, where instead of responding reasonably, Bravo fired an Uzi. Griselda fired back, and while she lived to see another day, her now ex-husband did not, cementing her title as the Black Widow. Later on in 1978, she married once again to a drug trafficker named Dario Sepulveda, who she had another son with. Because Pablo Escobar had taken over Colombia, Griselda decided it was time she found a new market, Miami, Florida. She and her husband moved there in the late 70s and ramped up production more than ever before. By the early 80s, they were moving more than $20 billion of cocaine through South Florida. She used her wealth to invest in legitimate businesses as well, which actually caused an economic boom for Florida. Not only did she move huge amounts of money, though, she single-handedly raised the murder rate in Miami to one of the highest in the whole country, thanks to the frequency of hits she put out on anyone she thought was the slightest threat. Griselda was violent and without remorse. Her husband was fed up with her keeping their son out of school, so he fled to Colombia with him, but Griselda got some of her corrupt police to flag him down, kill him, and return her son to her. On other occasions, she put out hits involving her men firing into public crowds, torturing parents while their kids watched, and even once had a toddler murdered on accident. But she wasn't horrified by this slip-up. She was delighted, as she knew the father of the child she had executed would never mess with her again. This ruthlessness caused Griselda Blanco to be the first female cartel boss to make over $1 billion. But money can't buy your safety forever. By the mid-80s, she had beef with almost every single other player in the drug game and had to flee from Miami to California in the hopes that no one would be looking for revenge on her while she goes about her daily life. However, the DEA is nationwide, and they were looking for her. With the help of Jerry Gomez, a former mechanic who had serviced her son's motorbikes, they found her. The two met up, and Jerry got just enough information out of her to obtain a warrant, which led to the police busting in her room on February 17, 1985. She was in the room reading the Bible with a gun on the counter. She didn't try to fight, though. After her sons were rounded up and her network was dismantled, she was charged with conspiracy to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine and was sentenced to 15 years. She tried appealing her case legally, which didn't work, so then she tried illegally, which also didn't work. Her genius plan was to kidnap John F. Kennedy Jr. and hold him for ransom, but this of course never happened. However, in 1994, Blanco was facing the death penalty for the child she had murdered in a hit, but she caught a break. The man who was testifying against her was having phone sex with two of the secretaries from the prosecutor's office, a mistake that made the whole case fall through. To save face, they just gave Griselda a plea deal, which she took, resulting in her only getting 20 years. She got out in 2004, flew to Colombia, then she fell into religion and started living a life of laying low. Pablo Escobar was dead and her enemies had moved on, except for one. On the night of September 3, 2012, she was purchasing meat at Cardiso Butcher Shop on the corner of 29th Street in Medellin. A motorcyclist entered the shop and shot her in the head and shoulder before taking off into the night. At the age of 69, she died an almost a fitting death, shot down by a motorcyclist gunman in similar fashion to the many motorcyclist sicarios she sent to murder her opposition. And thus concludes the story of the ruthless Queenpin. It is a story that proves that no matter how hard you try to escape your past, it will always catch up with you. Griselda Blanco's cold-blooded ways in the drug game made her a legend, but it also led to her downfall. It just goes to show that when it comes to the drug world, there is no such thing as second chances. Now, let's check out this next video and unravel another thrilling real-life story of a criminal who utilized their unique talents to commit heinous crimes and get rich.